In D&D 5e, there are a wide range of races, now known as species given the updated 2024 Player's Handbook that has come out in more recent times, that you can choose from when creating your character. Over the years, many species have come out that have had powerful features with the ability to break or completely change the way some characters play. So in this video, we'll be going over some of the best features that species have received over the years, including any nerfs and buffs featured in later releases. And starting things off is the Agile Escape Artist known as Nimble Escape, known by Goblins at number 10. Nimble Escape effectively allows you to have a rogue second level Cunning action class feature, minus dash action, by allowing you to use the disengage and hide action as a bonus action on each of your turns. This allows you to play any character as a pseudo-rogue, letting you sneak around the battlefield much easier and engage in hit-and-run tactics. For a ranger that likes to sneak around and use a bow at long distances, Nimble Escape allows you to make use of your bonus action by allowing you to give yourself advantage by hiding among the scenery during combat, or to get away from a creature that's rushing you. The same is even true for most spellcasters, as they usually don't have very many bonus actions to utilize outside of something like a Misty Step. But unlike Misty Step, which uses a second level spell slot each time, you can instead just bonus action disengage and reach safety that way. As a Mordenkainen presents Monsters of the Multiverse, small races no longer suffer a -5 movement penalty for being small creatures, so your Nimble Escape would be able to allow you to reach the same amount of ground that Misty Step covers, which is 30 feet. Unless, of course, you want to cross a gap or travel vertically. While this doesn't really break anything, Nimble Escape is a perfect tool for effectively any class that isn't a rogue, and allows you to make effective and regular use of your bonus action whenever you need it, especially if you're playing a class that is particularly starved for bonus actions, which is why it earns a spot on this list, albeit at number 10. And probably to everyone's surprise, we have Surprise Attack, a feature known by Bugbears at the 9th spot on this list. This feature allows you to, once per combat, deal an extra 2d6 damage to a surprise creature you hit with an attack. At least, that's how it worked back when Bugbears were first released in Volo's Guide to Monsters. And in their most modern iteration in Mordenkainen Presents Monsters of the Multiverse, you still deal an extra 2d6 damage, but it no longer requires the target to be surprised, and is no longer once per combat. You can just deal that extra damage with every attack, so long as the creature you're attacking hasn't taken their turn in combat yet. An 11th level Warlock can make 3 bolts with Eldritch Blast, causing each hit to deal an extra 2d6 force damage per bolt for a total of 66 extra damage, on top of the 3d10 force damage from hitting with all 3 bolts. Similarly, an 11th level fighter can make 3 attacks with their attack action. Assuming 20 strength and using a greatsword, each attack would deal 2d6 plus 5 slashing damage from the weapon, and an additional 2d6 slashing damage to surprise attack for a total of 4d6 plus 5 per attack, for a grand total of 12d6 plus 15 slashing damage. Then the Bugbear can action surge to make 3 more attacks for a final total of 24d6 plus 30, or an average of 114 slashing damage. This could be made even funnier with either version of the Great Weapon Master feat. The 2014 version of this feat allows you to take a -5 penalty to your attack roll while dealing a flat plus 10 damage to your weapon attack, so long as the weapon was a melee weapon you're proficient with and possesses the heavy property. This would result in a flat plus 60 slashing damage for landing all 6 of your weapon attacks, turning the previous 114 average slashing damage to a whopping 174 slashing damage on turn 1 of combat. Sadly though, this is no longer achievable if you're using the updated version of the Great Weapon Master feat. Instead of penalizing your attack rolls for a flat plus 10 to your damage, you simply add your proficiency modifier to all of your damage rolls made with your heavy weapon with no downsides, which is arguably stronger due to its overall consistency boost. However, what this means for our fighter is that they'll only gain a plus 24 boost to their damage due to having a plus 4 proficiency at 11th level, which would still result in a respectable 138 slashing damage at the start of combat. That being said, the major downside of Surprise Attack should be obvious. It only applies to creatures who haven't taken their turn yet. This means that unless you invest in any amount of dexterity to boost your initiative, there's a good chance you might not be going before most other creatures. However, there are ways to get around this. The 2014 version of the Alert feat allows you to add a plus 5 to your initiative roll, while the 2024 version only lets you add your proficiency to it, with the added benefit of allowing you to swap your initiative with a consenting ally in the same combat, which might be useful if your rogue rolled the highest and wanted to be first to capitalize on your surprise attack damage. Some magic items, such as the Weapon of Warding, can grant you advantage on initiative rolls, or you can be a subclass that allows you to use other stats to grant you a higher initiative bonus. For example, Gloomstalker Rangers can also add their Wisdom modifier to their initiative rolls on top of their dex for a relatively big bonus, allowing them a higher chance to take the first shot in combat. In the old iteration of the class, surprise attack combos exceptionally well with the Dread Ambusher subclass feature, which allows the Ranger to make an extra weapon attack on their first turn of combat, dealing an extra 1d8 damage of that weapon's damage type on top of its initial damage. This means that at 5th level, you could already make 3 attacks at the start of combat for a total of an extra 66 extra piercing damage with a longbow, for instance. And if you're funny enough to take a couple levels of fighter for action surge, that's 6 weapon attacks you can make before a fighter can reach level 11th. Unfortunately, this isn't really possible in the 2024 release of Gloomstalker, since their extra weapon attack is now replaced with the ability to deal an extra 2d6 psychic damage once per turn whenever they hit with a weapon. So you'd still only get 2 attacks, but could deal extra damage a bit more often, depending on your wisdom modifier. However, both versions still retain the ability to add their wisdom to their initiative, which can still be useful for a bugbear wanting to make use of their surprise attack feature. Now, you might be wondering why such a potentially high damaging feature is only taking number 9 on this list. This is mainly because of how niche it is for how often you might want to use it. To use this feature to its fullest, you have to have a very specific build for the character that can make a lot of attacks, such as a fighter, ranger, monk, or warlock, and a character with a high enough bonus to initiative so that they have the lowest chance of going last and the highest chance of going first to deal as much damage as possible to the most dangerous creature on the board. If you can fulfill these 2 criteria, then the surprise attack feature is one of the best. But if you're not building for it, then this feature has some generic use, but not enough to really be considered the best overall. Usually what makes an item, feature, or feat the best depends on how useful it is for everyone. If we take the aforementioned alert feat, being able to add any bonus at all to your initiative is invaluable to almost any character that wants to take it, especially for combat-heavy campaigns. Surprise attack just doesn't provide enough generic utility to afford a higher spot on this list, so it stands at the number 9 spot on this list. And at number 8, we have a bit of a two-way tie between Pack Tactics and Draconic Cry, both from the Kobold. Pack Tactics allows you to always have advantage on attack rolls against creatures so long as at least one of your allies isn't incapacitated and happens to be within 5 feet of that creature. This was extremely good on rogues that wanted to farm advantage so they could consistently proc their sneak attack a lot easier, while also having the boosted accuracy that comes with having advantage. In general though, pretty much any class benefited from having Pack Tactics. However, the main downside of this feature was that the kobolds come with sunlight sensitivity, a feature that tormented them with the unpleasant effect of having disadvantage in all attack rolls and perception checks that rely on sight when you, the target of your attack, or whatever you're trying to perceive, is in direct sunlight. Overall, this ended up meaning that you basically had to play around your allies in order to attack normally in most situations, or suffer disadvantage on your attack rolls. While it is possible to work around this by trying to keep combat indoors, or even wearing attire and try to prevent the sunlight from affecting you in the first place, when you do end up working around it, however, Pack Tactics becomes invaluable, and among one of the better traits a species can have. Unfortunately, this was later removed from the Kobold and replaced with Draconic Cry in Mordenkainen Presents Monsters of the Multiverse, which is also very strange. Draconic Cry allows you to use a bonus action to emit a cry at enemies within 10 feet of yourself, granting you and your allies advantage on all attack rolls against the enemies that heard your cry until the start of your next turn. And you can use this feature a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus per long rest. And since sunlight sensitivity was also removed in this rebalanced version of the Kobold, Draconic Cry is a lot stronger than Pack Tactics in a lot of ways. While you do lose the always-on capability of gaining the advantage from Pack Tactics, so long as you're playing around allies, you are also playing around your sunlight sensitivity weakness as well. Meanwhile, with Draconic Cry, you could give both yourself and your allies advantage on all attack rolls temporarily, which is a lot more versatile than just giving yourself advantage. In many ways, the overall level of both features are probably around the same. However, what keeps either from taking a higher spot on this list is the fact that Pack Tactics is no longer in the game if you're using more modern rules, and Draconic Cry isn't strong enough on its own to earn a higher spot on this list. which should be telling in regard to what's yet to come. Either way, Pack Tactics and Draconic Cry are still worthy features to have when playing a Kobold, as they are both generic enough to work on a large variety of creatures, so they take a respectable number 8. And at number 7 on this list, we have Feline Agility, known by Tabaxis. Feline Agility allows you to double your movement speed at any time without using the dash action until the end of your turn. The downside is that you can't use it again until you spend 1 turn moving 0 feet. However, if you need to get somewhere on the battlefield in a pinch, this feature is always going to be useful to have, as it also works with the dash action. A rogue with 30 feet of movement that wants to spend their entire turn moving can use their bonus action and normal action to dash, granting yourself a total of 90 feet of movement. But with Feline Agilities, that gets boosted to 180 feet in a single turn. But there are a variety of other ways to increase your speed to make this amount of movement speed ridiculous. Haste doubles that total movement speed to 360 feet, for example. With the only downside needing that you have to stay still for 1 round, Feline Agility is very easy to recharge, as it doesn't prevent you from using your normal movement speed if you really need it. It's just a neat little feature that lets you close gaps sooner without having to use any of your actions to dash. If you're a 17th level monk, your movement speed would be 60 feet thanks to the plus 30 bonus of movement speed bonus that you'd have thanks to your unarmed movement feature that you learn at 2nd level. This means that, without taking any feats, magic items, or using the dash action, you can just move 120 feet to your destination unhindered. Even difficult terrain will have a hard time slowing you down, since you pretty much just brute force your way through using this feature. That being said, while Feline Agility is definitely one of the stronger features a species can have, it's not outright game-breaking, since having a ton of movement speed gets redundant after a certain point. Yes, you can move around the battlefield at your leisure, but with nothing to take advantage of that movement, you're not doing much other than the occasional repositioning. However, the usefulness of not needing to use your dash action when you need to can't be understated, which is why this feature takes number 7. And flying high at number 6, we have Flight, which can be found on numerous species. While there are many ways for certain races to achieve temporary flight using their own features, such as a Gem Dragonborn using their Gem Flight feature to gain flight speed for 1 minute, what we're talking about here are species that have the flight feature built into their kit. So the Aarakocra, Fairy, Owlin, and the Winged Tiefling, for example. For the most part, flight gave these species the simple effect of having a flying speed equal to their walking speed. The only exception to this used to be the Aarakocra, where they had a humongous 50 feet of fly speed at the cost of only 25 feet of walking speed. Since Mordenkainen presents Monsters of the Multiverse, however, their movement speed is now in line with other flying races, as having a flying speed equal to their walking speed, which is now 30 feet instead of 25. As for what's so good about having an inherent fly speed at all times, there are many things. You can outreach your martial foes by simply flying out of their reach and pelting them with ranged attacks all day, for example. There's the infamous example of the level 1 Aarakocra using its immense fly speed and a magical +1 bow to pelt a Terras to death by simply staying in the air and out of its reach. As for whether or not your DM would actually allow a player to do this is an entirely different story. Flying also changes the way your DM has to approach combat, as not having enough ranged attackers would make combats too easy, but having too many would effectively invalidate having a flying speed at all. Making your players feel bad for simply playing their character and using them has never been a good thing. In this way, it's simply much easier to outright ban flying species as a whole, rather than try and find a good compromise most of the time. Even outside of combat, flying can be incredibly powerful, since there are so many things flying can bypass, it's not even funny. Want to give your party a platforming segment for your dungeon? Don't worry, the Flying Fairy already has that covered. Need to climb up something? Have your Winged Tiefling take a rope up there and tie it around something to trivialize the entire climbing segment. Need to figure out a way to cross a canyon? Same thing as before, but horizontal. While flying isn't the most powerful thing in the game, especially since flying becomes a lot easier to handle in later levels with enemies having more range options in general and can even have fly speeds of their own, it is the first feature on this list that can really break the game over its knee if a DM is unprepared for it, since it's not exactly hard to build for it like with surprise attack. All you really need is a ranged weapon and some vertical cover, and you're effectively good for a large chunk of the early game if your DM doesn't homebrew or knows how to play around it. Put all these things together and you have a worthy feature to take number 6 on this list. And blessing the number 5 spot on this list with its presence is the Blessing of the Raven Queen from the Shadar-Kai species. This feature works similar to other features that species get, where it basically functions as a free cast in a Misty Step that can be used a number of times per day equal to your proficiency modifier. Many of them come with secondary effects, such as the Eladrin's Phase Step feature, allowing them to apply one of 4 secondary effects to their teleportation, depending on their season. For example, an Autumn Eladrin may attempt to charm up to 2 creatures within 10 feet of themselves for up to 1 minute after teleporting. As for the Blessing of the Raven Queen secondary effect, it allows you to gain resistance to all damage until the start of your next turn after teleporting. While all other teleporting features have some pretty fun and potentially useful secondary effects, there's nothing more generically useful than taking less damage from all sources of damage. And since you get to do this proficient times per day, you eventually get enough charges of this feature to effectively become a tank for the team regardless of your class. A class that gains access to Armor of Agathys spell via multi-class or feats can sustain their temporary hit points gained from the spell much longer by taking only half damage, while outputting far more damage from the spell itself if you're hit by a melee attack. To explain, Armor of Agathys is a first level spell that grants you 5 temporary hit points. While you have these temp HP, a creature that hits you with a melee attack takes 5 cold damage. This spell doesn't require concentration, but ends early once the temp HP is gone. What's nice about the spell is the fact that it scales very well, granting an extra 5 temp HP and 5 extra cold damage per spell level used above first. So as long as you're able to maintain these temporary hit points, you'll always be a rose with plenty of thorns. This is made easier by being able to halve the amount of damage you take via Blessing of the Raven Queen. However, that's not the only way you can use this feature, of course. If you're a fighter or a barbarian, you can not only give yourself an extra 30 feet boost of movement as a bonus action via teleportation, you also give yourself a bit of extra protection at the same time as you place yourself in the middle of the enemy squadron that wants to beat you up. While not as game-breaking as having innate flying can be, there's something to be said about an ability that can make every class have resistance to every type of damage in the game that is usually only dedicated to the 2014 Bear Totem Barbarian, minus Psychic of course. And anyone who has ran a game with the old Bear Totem Barbarian knows how damage resistance to almost every damage type in the game can skewer entire combats. So, being able to do it, even temporarily, as a rogue with Uncanny Dodge to further reduce damage by half, or evasion to lessen the impact of dexterity saving throws they fail, can prove to be invaluable. Just think about how hard it would be to kill the old Moon Druid subclass with this feature, since species abilities transfer over to their wild shape form, since the rules state that you retain the benefits of any features from your class, species, or other sources that could use them if the new form is physically capable of doing so. Unfortunately, the 2024 iteration of the Moon Druid and Bear Totem Barbarian have had their survivability significantly reduced in favor of other things, which would take too long to cover. Fortunately, however, the significance of Blessing of the Raven Queen remains untouched, and can still benefit any character, which is why it takes number 5 on this list. And at number 4, we have Magic Resistance, known by Satyrs and Yuan-ti Purebloods. Magic Resistance is a feature which allows you to have advantage on all saving throws against spells and magical effects, and is considered one of the best effects in the game. With a low dex score, you would still have an okay chance at dodging a fireball and taking less damage, while a character with an already high dex save has a fairly low chance of failing this same save, simply due to how strong advantage can be. This feature also applies to magical effects in general. For example, a Beholder's Eye Rays are considered magical, meaning that you would have advantage in all saving throws you make against them. Now, if this wasn't enough, imagine rolling a Paladin, or having one in your party with maxed out Charisma. At 6th level, Paladins gain the Aura Protection feature, allowing themselves and allies within 10 feet to gain a bonus to all saving throws they make equal to the Paladin's Charisma. With 20 Charisma, there's a whopping +5 bonus to every single saving throw they make. Tack on a magical resistance and you're effectively immune to the concept of failure when it comes to making saving throws. However, as strong as this feature is, there are 2 major reasons why magic resistance can't be any higher on this list. The first is that the magic resistance is only available on 2 races, the Satyr and the Yuan-ti Pureblood, which aren't exactly common races to find in most campaigns, whether it's by the DM choice or just lore reasons. Deep Gnomes technically have something similar called Gnomish magic resistance, but that only applies to intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saves against spells, but not magical effects, at least in their iteration of Mordenkainen Presents Monsters of the Multiverse. This actually ties into the second reason why magical resistance can't be higher on this list. It was slightly nerfed in later printings of Satyr and Yuan-ti Pureblood, now just called Yuan-ti, In Monsters of the Multiverse, book species had their magical resistance changed to only work against spells, so you could no longer have advantage against a beholder's eye raids. Still, having an advantage against spells can be a huge boon, since some of the more deadly effects your party can come across will happen from spells. Fireball, Dominate Monster, Disintegrate, and Finger of Death are all great examples of particularly dangerous spells that magic resistance would definitely help you fight against, which is why this feature ranks so high on this list, despite its more recent nerf. However, there is a feature you can have that works similarly that isn't nerfed that may interest you. And at number 3, we have Gnomish Cunning and Vedalken Dispassion, known by Gnomes and Vedalken respectively. These features work very similarly to the aforementioned Gnomish magic resistance, where you have advantage on intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saving throws, except it's no longer tied to just spells or even magical effects. Instead, this feature applies to any and all saving throws involving those stats. So, whether you're being targeted by a fear spell, a lich's frightening gaze action, or a dragon's frightful presence, which is normally not considered magical in the first place, your Gnomish Cunning or Vedalken Dispassion will always have your back. While in some ways, not having advantage on strength, dex, or con saving throws could make these two features slightly worse than magical resistance, the fact that having advantage applies to even non-magical effects makes these two features worth the sacrifice. And even if they didn't apply to non-magical effects, Gnomish Cunning and Vedalken Dispassion still applying to both spells and magical effects already blows the nerfed version of magic resistance out of the water. That being said, neither of these features takes a higher spot on this list, mostly because the next two features are just a lot more generally useful. Another reason is because of their availability. Vedalken comes from Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica campaign setting, and already isn't a common species for players to pick. As for Gnomish Cunning, it's technically a buffed version of Gnome Cunning in 2014, which only applied to magic, making it only available in the 2024 version of the PHB, which not everyone will be running yet. That being said, if you are able to run either species in your game, you could do no wrong with having advantage on every single mental save in the entire game, especially since wisdom saves become increasingly more common as you reach higher tiers of play. And gambling to the number 2 spot on this list is the Lucky feature, or simply Luck in the 2024 version, gained by being a Halfling. Whether you're playing the 2014 version or the 2024 version of Halfling, the feature functions the same. Whenever you roll a 1 on a d20 roll, you can re-roll it and must use the new roll. One of the strongest things you can do in a game all about rolling math rocks is being able to manipulate said math rocks into better results. Magic Resistance, Gnomish Cunning, and Vedalken Dispassion are excellent examples of this, granting you advantage on a lot of saving throws. Luck works the same way, except it's for any d20 roll and only lets you re-roll once. While that may not sound as strong as having advantage on all saving throws, being able to almost never critically fail an attack roll, for instance, is an incredible boon, and even provides a conditional way of gaining higher critical hit chance. Consider that there is a 5% chance to roll a nat 20 on an attack roll and landing a crit under normal circumstances. With advantage, the chance goes up to 9.75%. So if you roll a 1, you pretty much get that temporary 9.75% chance to land a critical hit. Another way you can look at this ability is to treat it as having a much lower chance than normal to actually roll a 1. With advantage, your chances of critically failing are 0.25%. or 1 in 400 chances rather than 1 in 20. In a way, you always have a hidden advantage modifier to your rolls that only activates when you roll a specific number, which is incredibly powerful when making rolls that count. Rolled a 1 while trying to save against a fireball? Well, re-roll it and you might end up with a high enough roll to succeed instead. Having a bad day with an ability check that you're proficient in and keep rolling 1s? No need to use your inspiration to re-roll that because luck's got you covered. While this feature isn't always on like our previous two entries, it is more generally useful in helping you prevent failed rolls, which can be incredibly more powerful if your DM treats all nat 1s as failures and not just attack rolls. But generally speaking, luck is incredibly useful for preventing low rolls where it matters most, which can mean the difference between angering the king for asking him to give up his kingdom and simply laughing at your incredibly funny and not serious joke about him giving up his kingdom to a party of misfits that just waltzed into his throne room like they already owned the place. Sometimes turning a complete failure into a success can be far more important in the grand scheme of things, which is why luck takes number 2 on this list. And to no one's surprise, the number 1 spot on this list goes to the feat feature from Variant Humans and Custom Lineages. This feature gets you the benefit of picking 1 extra feat at first level, something no other class gets. While the trade-off for variant humans obtaining an extra feat is only gaining a +1 bonus to any 2 ability scores, rather than the +2/+1 stat bonus that other species get, or the +1 to all stats like base humans get, this is offset by the fact that many feats already grant an extra +1 to certain ability scores. And even if they don't, they usually have an effect that far outweighs the effect of an extra +1 bonus. For example, we talked a lot about how manipulating dice rolls is incredibly powerful. This is because, in a game about randomness, making your own rolls as consistent as possible can result in tipping the scales of power balance far into your favor than what is normally intended. Well, with this extra feat, you could take, say, the Lucky feat, no relation to the Lucky feature that Halflings get, and get 3 free rerolls per day on any d20 roll you make, or force an enemy to reroll an attack roll against you. Lucky is considered one of the most powerful feats in the game, so much so that many tables outright ban their players from picking it up. This is because, at least in the older version of the feat, you were allowed to pick which d20 to use for the roll whenever you forced a reroll. So if your enemy rolled an attack roll with advantage and rolled a nat 1 and a 20, you could force them to reroll into, say, a 14, but then just pick the 1 they rolled, causing a critical miss on their attack roll. Or if you were forced to make a saving throw at disadvantage, you could choose whatever rolled the highest instead of the number you rolled for the best odds of success. This was, understandably, changed in the 2024 version of the feat, where it just provides you with advantage on the rolls listed. But, of course, that's not the only feat you can take with this species feature. There are over 100 feats to choose from, so the possibilities are endless. You could take Skill Expert to learn more skills, Sharpshooter or Great Weapon Mastery to bump up your damage, Magic Initiate to learn more spells, Sentinel to trap enemies when they try to leave your reach by reducing their movement speed to 0 when making opportunity attacks, Alert to have a +5 bonus to initiative right at first level, etc, etc. Because of how powerful this feature is, it does make a return in the 2024 version of the human, but not nearly as strong. Instead of feat, it's called Versatile, and allows you to pick an origin feat of your choice from a list of 10 feats, most of which are from the 2014 Player's Handbook, albeit rebalanced in some cases, including the nerfed Lucky feat. That being said, whether or not you're using the variant human or custom Lineage version of this feature, or the updated 2024 Versatile feature, you're effectively gaining 24 levels worth of feats if you really want to put a number on it. When it comes to breaking the limits of your games, there really isn't anything better than taking an extra feat right out the gate, assuming your DM doesn't already allow for that for balance sake. And if your DM does allow everyone to take an extra feat at first level anyway, with the caveat that you, the versatile human, cannot, then I'd say you'd already broken the game without even really trying.